Forensic Science, Lecture 2-2, Searching the Crime Scene. Conducting a systematic search for evidence is key at the very beginning of the investigation. It needs to be thorough and systematic. Even if a suspect isn't immediately seized or the motive is known, circumstances are apparent, that evidence is still going to be used in court, and so it still needs to follow the same protocol that every other investigation covers. The investigator in charge is usually the one who assigns the responsibilities to the personnel. At this point, though, a forensic scientist isn't usually needed until the evidence is submitted to the lab. If available to the law enforcement, it would be a CSI team or it would be a evidence technician. The initial search of the crime scene needs to have the point of entry and exit of the perpetrator. That needs to be located first. And from there, an indirect path is then taken to the center of the crime scene. Any obvious items of evidence are located and documented immediately. And then conditions of the scene are observed and recorded either within the notes or in the video recording of the scene, with special attention being paid to any items or conditions that may suggest the timing of the incident or do not appear to belong within that area itself. When considering how to search the crime scene, evidence technicians may subdivide the scene into segments and then search these segments individually. There are 5 search patterns that can be used: a strip line search, a grid search, a spiral search, wheel array search, or quadrant or zone search. And these searches must include all probable points of entry and exit as the investigator is searching for the evidence. In a strip or a line search pattern, you have 1 or 2 investigators that start at the boundary of the crime scene, and they search in straight lines across the scene to the other side, do a turn, and come on back. In a grid search pattern, you have 2 or more investigators that form a grid. So in other words, they're searching in lines that are parallel to each other and overlapping, and they are perpendicular to each other as well. In a spiral search pattern, you have 1 investigator that searches in a spiral pattern. They can either go from the center of the crime scene to the boundaries, which would be outward direction, or from the boundaries of the crime scene to the center, which would be an inward direction. In a wheel or array search pattern, you typically have several investigators. They can work from the center of the scene out towards the boundaries, and they're walking systematically in unison together looking for evidence. That would be an outward direction, or they can all move from the boundary to the center, which would be an inward direction in the same manner looking for evidence. In the final search pattern, which is the quadrant or the zone search pattern, the crime scene is divided into smaller sections, or what they refer to as zones. And you have 1 or more investigators, depending on the size of the area, are assigned to search each zone. By breaking up these zones into smaller areas and then using multiple investigators to search the smaller areas, it allows the investigator to be more thorough in their search because they don't have such a large area to investigate. With searching for evidence, what to search for is actually going to be determined by the circumstances of the crime. So for instance, if we're looking at a homicide, the search typically centers around the weapon or evidence left from any contact between the victim and the assailant. In a burglary, the efforts are typically located to the tool marks at the entry point to see what they used to get in. In a hit and run, the outside, the undercarriage of the car is examined, but in cases of homicide, burglary, kidnapping, all of these, the areas of the vehicle inside and out are searched as well. So it's not just when a car is involved, because a lot of times what ends up happening is due to Lockhart's principle, any contact between the suspect and the victim or the suspect in the area, there was transfer. And so the vehicle should have some, even if it was minute, some sort of evidence of being part of that crime. This is lecture 2-2, and there will be a quiz next class.